Natural Habitat Adventures is pleased to be bringing you this webinar today, Ultimate Alaska Wildlife Safari, presented by Justin Gibson. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Justin. At the age of 8, Justin saw his first wild bear. And more than 20 years later, his infatuation with all things ursine continues to grow. While attending the University of Alaska, Anchorage, he spent summers as a ranger in Katmai National Park. He has since guided countless visitors into the Alaskan wilderness for more than 16 years. More recently, Justin has been guiding polar bear expeditions in Churchill, Manitoba, though his nature obsession doesn't stop with bears. A self-described eco-nerd, Justin is fascinated with wildlife, botany, microbiology, birding, glaciology, and scuba diving. And when he's not guiding, Justin likes to travel and photograph the world's most beautiful places, including recent trips to Yellowstone, Jordan, Taiwan, Cambodia, Egypt, Thailand, Laos, and Malaysia. But today he's broadcasting from Denver, Colorado. So Justin, over to you. Oh, hold on, I got you muted. Now, let's try that again. Go ahead, Justin.
Thank you very much, Lee. Happy New Year. And Happy New Year to all the viewers out there. Thank you for taking an hour out of your busy days to kind of learn a little bit about this Ultimate Alaska wildlife safari we've been doing for a number of years now. As Lee mentioned, I did see my first bear at 8, and it actually gave me this fascination that I couldn't really shake. And so the very first opportunity I moved to Alaska. That's a young Katmai National Park ranger. And what that did is it really allowed me to learn more about these amazing brown bears in particular. And I really liked the public education aspect of it. And so a natural progression for me was to move into the private sector. I guided for a number of lodges on that same coast, the Alaska Peninsula. We'll talk more about that in a while. And ended up, I don't know, some 6 or 7 years ago with Natural Habitat. And so I got a number of Natural Habitat trips throughout the year. The next one coming up in just a couple of weeks is the Northern Lights and Arctic Cultures of Churchill, Canada. While it's incredibly cold, it's very rewarding. The Northern Lights are really spectacular, and the photography as well is a very big treat. Of course, the wild side of China is a remarkable trip that takes you deep inside the Sichuan plateau and really into the wild part of China, which is, you know, most people think is an oxymoron, but there is a wild side of China, so keep that in mind. And of course, I am now on the Tundra Lodge for the past few years in Churchill during our polar bear season. We have a number of polar bear trips. I just happen to be on the Tundra Lodge. So if you have any interest in that, I'm sure the sales representatives can help you out. But why we're really here, of course, is to talk about Alaska, this gigantic state. We actually have 3 trips in which I've guided all of them in this state. The reason why we have 3 trips is because it's gigantic. Alaska is a very gigantic state. If you were to put it over the lower 48, it's about 1/3 the size, about twice the size of Texas. Sorry, Texans. We have over 3 million lakes. I apologize to any Minnesotans. Alaska has enough glaciers to cover West Virginia. I think we have over 100,000 different glaciers in the state of Alaska. The population density is remarkably small. In fact, there are more caribou than people in the state of Alaska. And if Manhattan had the same density as Alaska does, population-wise, there'd be 25 people in it. So all of that equals a very, very special place with a lot of vastness, a lot of wilderness still left. We also have all top 11 summits in Alaska, including Denali. McKinley is not a name that we use anymore. So these 3 trips that we have in Alaska, of course, are the coastal wilderness trip in the panhandle of the southeast section of Alaska. It's really remarkable. You get to go to Glacier Bay National Park. You get to see NN Creek, which is a very unique place to see brown bears and black bears possibly fishing side by side. On the western part of Alaska, there's a Kodiak to Katmai trip. So that's just bears, bears, bears for the entire week. And of course, why we're all here today talking about the ultimate Alaska wildlife safari. This is what I consider the greatest hits of Alaska. It's remarkable in diversity in the fact that you get 3 major different ecosystems. You get to explore the tundra, the boreal forest, the temperate rainforest, and of course Denali in the interior as well, and a magnificent range of wildlife. So here's the itinerary with a broad stroke. We start in Fairbanks. Our next stop would be Denali National Park. Make a brief stop in Talkeetna on our way to Girdwood. Then from Seward, we'll explore the temperate rainforest of Fox Island and get to experience the Kenai Fjords National Park. And then on to Katmai National Park by way of Anchorage. So we'll just go over kind of line by line there and formulate some more questions for you guys to kind of think about going forward. This is a nice shot of Fairbanks, Alaska, where the trip starts. So during that first day, if you come in early enough, you have the opportunity to maybe visit the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. It's a remarkable university that is well known for its Geophysics Institute, the study of aurora, of course wildlife, and they have a wonderful museum, both of arts and natural history. Of course, that night we'll do a welcome dinner and just kind of go over the whole itinerary, a lot like what we're doing today. But Fairbanks is a really unique place. It's the second largest city in Alaska at about 35,000 people. It also gets the hottest out of any of the places we'll visit due to it being in the interior. So it's very common for it to be 80 degrees, even when the rest of the trip might be significantly colder than that, in the 60s and raining possibly. So the next day we'll drive down. Our goal is to get to Denali and into the back of Denali. Of course, on the way we'll stop at this wonderful, unique town called Nenana. Now, Nenana is known for a number of different reasons. It sits on the Nenana River, which is very important. But of course, in the interior, just like it gets very hot in the summer, it gets extremely cold in the winter. And it's very dark as well in the winter. And so you can imagine people have to be very, very creative in one of the ways they do that is you see on the right this tripod or this quadrupod. Now they'll put that on the frozen river behind the pod there, and they'll attach a string to that tripod to this tower on the left. Now people vote, and you can too if you're on the trip. People kind of guess as to when the ice will first break up enough to move that tripod and pull that string to the exact day and second. And so you can kind of guess. And of course, if you guess correctly or closest, you get the pot. And sometimes that pot can be into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's really unique to kind of see this, how people pass the time. Nenana is also on the Alaska Steppe. And the Alaska Steppe is very important because that's how the first Asians came over. Of course, there were what we believe were two migrations, one being during an ice age. So the Bering Strait was then landlocked, called Beringia. And so we'll talk a lot about that on the trip. We'll talk about the migration and how that came to be, the other migration being the Inuit people. So we'll have a chance to explore 3 main types of Native Alaskans, and Nenana is a very good place to start that process. Of course, we wouldn't be driving past Nenana if it wasn't to get to Denali. And Denali is a magnificent park. You know, our whole goal here is to stay in the back of Denali. In fact, we will drive 89 miles into the park. You can only do that on these buses of the lodges. And it's always remarkable. People just fall in love with the vastness, kind of a glimpse into what maybe the lower 48 might have been before civilization. And of course, we'll stay 3 or 4 days in the back of Denali. There are a couple of different lodges back there, depending on the trip, whether it's a photo group or a standard safari group. But the reason we stay 3 to 4 days in the back of the park is because this mountain is incredibly hard to see. On an average year, only 40% actually have a chance of seeing even a glimpse of a hint of the mountain itself. Denali being over 20,000 feet, 20,310 roughly feet, it creates its own weather, you can imagine. And so to see the mountain clear, actually only 20% of the people that visit Denali actually get to see that. So we significantly up our chances by staying more days. This park is mainly visited by us for, of course, the mountain and caribou as well. So hopefully we can see those two things. We give ourselves the best chance by staying a few more days. After Denali, we'll take the train or the bus to the entrance of Denali National Park, and we will get on the Alaska Railroad. So the Alaska Railroad is really, it's got to be the most beautiful train, I would say, in the world, although I haven't been to all of them, but it's just remarkable. And what's even better for us is that we actually will have a dome car. So we're going to take the train from Denali all the way to a town called Talkeetna. And Talkeetna is a wonderful, quirky little town that's actually this year celebrating 100 years of as a town. So in 1915, President Woodrow Wilson declared Talkeetna the headquarters of the Alaska Railroad. So you can imagine a tent city kind of sprang up, and by 1916, a general store, a cigar store, a trading post, a post office was all founded. And so this year is really unique. I'm excited to be going to Talkeetna this year, being that they're celebrating that 100 years. It should be a very festive place. Of course, 100 years later, Talkeetna, the town that inspired Northern Exposure, actually, that show Northern Exposure, is now a hub for climbers to climb Denali and Foraker. And this is actually a view from the Susitna River that sits right at the edge of Talkeetna. So even here we have chances to see Denali. We really give ourselves a very good chance. So after exploring Talkeetna, in the morning we'll get up and slowly make our way past Anchorage, past the Turnagain Arm. The Turnagain Arm is really beautiful. You have two sets of mountains, the Kenai Mountains and the Chugach Mountains, with this large inlet in the middle. The inlet has a possibility. This year we saw a lot of belugas, and of course Dall sheep, which are a cousin, a very closely related cousin to the Rocky Mountain sheep, bighorn sheep. But we'll make our way past all that to the wonderful ski resort of Alyeska. And Alyeska is really beautiful in the summer too, and there are a lot of trails that kind of allow us to very easily, not much walking or strenuous walking, to explore the temperate rainforest, the northernmost point of the temperate rainforest in the world, actually. So we will get to kind of explore this. These are a couple of clients from last year, just exploring the incredible difference between what intermittent or permanent permafrost will do to an environment, allowing trees to have to be stunted, as opposed to the temperate rainforest, where it really is just like you're in the Pacific Northwest. It's really beautiful. So from this Alyeska resort, in the morning we'll do this wonderful little hike into the rainforest. We'll grab lunch, and in the afternoon we'll actually take another train, just 30 minutes or so, to Spencer Glacier. And this is a picture of a group I took last year. Just really enjoying. The Spencer Glacier is really amazing. And with the raft, it's neat because you're able to go really close to these icebergs. And for photography, it's just a dream. From there, the very next day, we will drive all the way into Seward. We'll get on a boat into the Kenai Fjords National Park, and we will be staying on this little tiny island called Fox Island. Now, in the daytime, they do have some day tourists that come and you know, kind of eat dinner on their way out towards the rest of their Kenai Fjords tour. However, at night, this is all ours. We pretty much have an island to ourselves. It's very unique, and it is incredibly beautiful. You can see here it's tucked in inside the temperate rainforest. From that lodge, I've actually seen orcas and humpback whales because there's a shelf that just gets very deep, which allows these large marine mammals to come in. This happens to be probably everyone's favorite lodging on the trip. It's just remarkable. Of course, the only reason we stay here, one of the reasons, is because we want to get out there and enjoy the Kenai Fjords National Park ourselves. This place is just magnificent. We'll see lots of seals and sea lions, potentially many different types of whales. One thing that's very unique about the past couple of years in this park is that we've started to see bubble net feeding, which is a cooperative behavior among humpback whales. That has never been the case, or at least since we've started to observe bubble net feeding in southeast Alaska, but they've started to teach the other whales, and so that behavior is broadening. And so it's a very good chance to actually see bubble net feeding humpbacks inside Kenai Fjords National Park. Like I said, there's a lot of sea mammals, and so we'll have an opportunity to see stellar sea lions, which were highly endangered at one point. We'll get to talk about sea otters and why they're incredibly important not only to the ecosystem as a keystone species, but also without them, Alaska's history might be very, very different. And so that's always very fun to talk about. Of course, if you're a birder, Kenai Fjords is just a wonderland of rare birds. This is an Arctic tern. It's the largest migrating animal in the world. A very close second would be the sooty shearwater. We can see both of those species. Really just incredible. And of course, I think one of the most unique things of this trip is being able to go out on a private boat, because usually when people go to the Kenai Fjords, they're on a boat that has a lot of people on it. And so for us to be able to get on a private boat is pretty unique. And we get to go right up to these tidewater glaciers, a glacier that meets the ocean, and creates kind of an environment where the glaciers are volatile. They calve into the ocean quite a lot, and we're able to explore that and stay as long as we want. Where most tours only stay about 20 minutes, we can stay as long as we want. Oftentimes I like to have lunch here, and it just gives us more of an opportunity to one of those big chunks of ice to come down. Of course, when they do, it's always a good time to do a little cheers. By now, you should be very comfortable with your fellow travelers. After Fox Island, we'll be there for a couple of days. We will head straight for Seward, and Seward is a very sleepy harbor town. It's very beautiful. We'll be able to stay here and explore the harbor. Oftentimes, you can see sea otters from here. Lots of different bird species. Some very, very good food, including king crab and salmon, etc. But our main purpose is to go to the Alaska Sea Life Center. We will actually go behind the scenes of one of the only nonprofit organizations in the world that has both public aquariums and a fully supported research facility. So these people do just magnificent things. They rehabilitate animals. They do a lot of studies as to see why maybe the sea lions are declining in one area, etc. So we like to support that, and to get a behind-the-scenes tour is very, very unique, and I really enjoy this area. Get very close to these birds, as well as sea lions and otters, etc. It's a really good time, and it's also a perfect time to begin exploring kind of the science of Alaska's 5 species of salmon. They have wonderful exhibits to explain how that process works in the life cycle, and of course going forward in this trip, you can imagine getting into bear activity. The salmon are a very big part of our conversations. So after Seward, we'll stay a night in beautiful downtown Anchorage, my home base for a number of years. And it's just gorgeous. Flowers everywhere. You can imagine with 24-hour sunlight in the summer, flowers grow big, everything grows big. And so we'll have time to explore that on our own, and of course we'll have dinner almost always as a group. But our main purpose is a stopover in Anchorage because we will take a float plane across the inlet, basically onto the Alaska Peninsula, and land on a lake called Brooks Lake. Now, Brooks River feeds Brooks Lake, and here's Brooks River. You can imagine what's coming next. Right in front of you is a big 6 to 7 foot tall barrier, essentially, for salmon that they have to jump up. Now, if you're a bear species, you can't outswim fish, of course, so you need some kind of an advantage. And the advantage here, of course, is a giant barrier in which they have to jump up in order to get to the next lake to spawn. So I think the highlight for most people on this trip, of course, would be the brown bears fishing on the falls. And of course, this is kind of where I got my start, so it's always really neat to go full circle and see some of these rangers that have been there for a while. And why I think I continue to do this job is to see people's faces when they first experience something so great, whether it be the Northern Lights for the first time, or in this particular case, the bears. You know, it's hard to not tear up. It's really, really fascinating. And you're not just seeing one bear randomly. You can see up to 13, 14 bears on these falls at one time. It's a very huge hotspot during the best times of the year. Of course, the salmon runs, there's a lot in play there. Temperature can cause havoc with them, so they're a little late or a little early, but we try our best to hit it right on the money every time, and so no one goes home dissatisfied. Like I said, this trip is just kind of the greatest hits of Alaska. You know, if a friend wanted to get you into a new band, they might give you a greatest hits CD of that band. Well, this is the greatest hits of Alaska. It's really a way to explore in depth the best of Alaska, including 3 ecosystems: alpine tundra of the Denali National Park area, the boreal forest from part of Denali all the way down into Anchorage. Of course, lots of different opportunities to see wildlife in there. And of course, the temperate rainforest from the Chugach area in Alyeska down into basically the rest of our trip until we get to brown bear country. And of course, lots and lots of wildlife potential. Of course, brown bears are definitely a highlight. We have the opportunity to see black bears, possibly. Of course, lots of sea mammals and whales and caribou and moose, and potential to see wolves and lynx, not to mention just a whole assortment of birds. If you're a birder, this is the trip for you. Last year the birding wasn't great because snow wasn't there to insulate the mosquito eggs, so all the mosquitoes died, and so there wasn't a great deal of birds. However, I think this year is going to be different. Alaska's getting pelted with snow this year, so I think if you're a birder, this is going to be a very, very good year for you. And I think the biggest highlight that people take is just getting to know your fellow travelers. And I have travelers that have been traveling together now for 10, 15 years. I think that's a very special bond you make, and I always look forward to kind of catering that a little bit. So, I just think overall this is such a great trip, and now that I'm talking about it, I'm really, really ready for for June. But anyway, thank you very much for listening. I know there might be quite a lot of questions, and let's just get to it.
Well, you are right, Justin. There are a lot of questions, so let's jump right into those. Several people are interested in the differences between the photo tours and the standard trip.
Yeah, that's always one of the first questions I'm prepared to answer. It comes up a lot. I think the biggest differences would be that the photo trips stay one more day longer in the Denali National Park. But always, I think the main difference is that if we see a flower, for instance, that in 2 hours the sun might hit it just right to make a very powerful shot. Well, in a regular trip, we probably won't bother with going back to that flower 2 hours later. But on a photo trip, it's really all about those quality shots and actually taking our time and looking deep into the, kind of the details of a subject and kind of looking at time and the magic hours and marking areas down where we want to go back and visit later that day or early in the morning. I think that's the main difference, and that is a very constant difference on these trips.
Okay. All right, that's good. Now, what about, we had somebody wondering also about the photo trips. What would you recommend practicing, or how would you recommend honing your skills in preparation for the photography trip? You can come in with a camera and not know anything really, and the guide should be able to get you into some very, very good stuff, understanding some of the mumbo jumbo that seems very difficult. Aperture is very simple. It's just depth of field, and so once you learn that, that becomes less of a scary thing to talk about. But I think before the trip, going into the trip, preparing, is to know your camera. So many people miss opportunities, in my experience, by not knowing the camera. So understand what aperture means and maybe how to switch it. Of course, we'll always remind you all the time about when it's good to use aperture priority or shutter priority. But if you know your camera a little bit, at least, or comfortable switching it around and understanding what your buttons do, that is a huge advantage for you and a huge help for us. Okay, very good. Then what about the SLR cameras? What lenses do you recommend for those hikes?
Oh, that's a very good question. For this trip, it is very, very important to have a wide angle. And so if you're talking about length, focal length, I often use a 16 to 35 millimeter wide angle, but then it's also very important to have some zoom, and I think a 70 to 300 range, and there are lots, of course, there are pro levels, and then also lenses for a couple $100 in that range as well. 300 is a very, very good distance for the bears our last few days. You don't really need any more than that. You'll see the big lenses, but we'll often make fun of them because it's just not necessary. So those two lenses, and I think you should be in good shape for the whole trip.
Okay. So let's shift gears from photography and ask some more generic questions. How big is the group of people that you'll be, how many people would you be traveling with on this trip?
I think the max is 15, and oftentimes it sits right at 12 or 13. And that's a really good size. Yeah, I mean, the photo groups are a little less people-wise, but all in all, any more than that, and you can definitely feel it on the trip like this. But I think 14 or 15 is a really good size, and that's what we keep it at. Okay.
And would you consider this trip to be physically easy, moderate, or strenuous?
Easy. The hardest part, the most strenuous part of this trip that is not, there a couple of times during the trip I offer some strenuous hikes that some people take, some people don't, just to give some of those that want to be active the chance to be active. But for the most part, the most strenuous part is the 1.5 mile of flat walking to get from the Brooks Lodge to the Brooks Falls to watch the bears. And that is completely on flat ground, gravel, basically dirt, not even really gravel, very even terrain. And so if you can consider yourself walking at sea level, pretty much a mile and a half, and standing around for a little while, you know, an hour to watch the bears, 2 hours, and then walking in a mile and a half back, you will be in good shape for the whole trip.
Okay. And there's a question here about whether you have any family-focused trips, or maybe put another way, what would the youngest travelers be that one might experience on this trip?
The limitation here with, and I think, you know, the sales representatives will give you a better understanding of that, but from my perspective, the limiting factor here is the bears. And I don't think that there is a limitation per se, as long as your kids are, that they listen and they're respectful of nature. They're not going to be yelling and screaming or running. I think there's something that can be worked out, but that would be a better question to ask the sales representatives.
Okay, yeah, good advice there, good. Okay, another basic question, how long are these trips?
That's a very good question. I believe this one, without looking in the catalog, I believe it's 12 or 13 days, somewhere in there. Yeah, so it's basically a 2-week trip, and the reason we do it that way is because we want to allow ourselves to explore it. And Alaska's really big. I mean, we're taking planes, trains, and automobiles in order to see the state. And so if we were traveling every single day, it would get exhausting, yeah, even for me. So the ability to not have to unpack and pack up every single day, except for a couple of those transition days, is a very nice luxury.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, a couple more questions here. These are about best time to see certain things. So best time to see a salmon run?
That's a good question. Well, we have 5 species of salmon in Alaska. For this particular trip, we're mainly concerned about 2 species, the sockeye salmon and the silver salmon. Now, the sockeye salmon are more of a late June all the way through July fish. That being said, because of the temperature changes, everything has been moving around, and it's really kind of hard to gauge within a week or two. For instance, last week it was about a week and a half late. So they ran well into the first week of August. And then, of course, right after the sockeye salmon would be the silver salmon. So really, late June, July, early August, late August through September, all of those times are very good. The September, the bears are really big. The foliage is just gorgeous and yellow and red. But you won't see many live fish. Most of the fish are going to be spawned and dead, which allows even the subadult bears that don't know how to fish yet, it allows them to fatten up for the winter. So, but when you're talking about fish, late June through August.
Okay. And then best time of year for some other wildlife, such as whales versus bears versus eagles. Is there a trade-off?
That's the beautiful thing about this trip. In Denali, there is not really a season for those interior animals per se, the caribou, the moose, the interior grizzly bears, which, by the way, grizzly bear and brown bear, the same species. The difference being brown bears have a salmon source, so they get larger and less aggressive. So in Denali, anytime that we go into the park, you know, late June through September, those wildlife opportunities will be there. Now, as we get south into the Kenai Fjords National Park, that's pretty much the same. In the summertime, everything is bioproductive. It's very, very bioproductive. The sea is incredibly active, and so you of course orcas, and that goes through all the way into late August, and this September I did a trip, and they were also very, very active. Now they stopped bubble net feeding in September, but everyone saw very, very good humpback whale sightings well into September as well. So that's the beautiful thing about this trip, is that with all of this light and the bioproductivity, basically your only limiting factor is salmon. And if the bears are actually in an area that they're congregating, so we can see them in mass quantity, and of course natural habitat talks to myself and the other bear guides that we have to kind of pick the best dates. And so I think you'll be happy with any of those dates, really, that are available.
Good. Okay. Well, what about Northern Lights? Is there a possibility of seeing those during these dates?
Oh, Lee, you're killing me here. No,
I know it.
No, that's a good question. It's one of those questions where I consider it a bonus. The Northern Lights, even right now, are probably going on. It's just a matter of it being dark enough and clear enough, and the solar activity has to have it has to be a little active. Those are the three factors. Now, when you're north, way up in Fairbanks, sits right in the auroral belt, the most active area. So you can pretty much one of those three is going to be there. Now you're looking at clear skies, which are very difficult in Alaska, and darkness. So with darkness, you can take away, of course, June and July, because those are the months in which we have the most sunlight. Now in August, there's potential, because it's dark, sometime during the night it's dark, and you can get wake-up calls, but you need it to be clear. And in August and September, it's usually pretty rainy. That being said, I've definitely seen Northern Lights, some of the best Northern Lights in September in Alaska. So it's possible. So it's a bonus for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. 2 more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. And this one probably comes up a lot for you, but it's about what you can expect in terms of mosquitoes in the height of the summer.
That's a great question. On an average year, so I'm going to answer it like an average year, and then I'll tell you why I make that distinction. On an average year, the interior, so Fairbanks, Denali, they can be actually fairly miserable. It's something that you have to prepare yourself for and use a lot of bug repellents and nets. But as we get to the coast, the insects aren't that bad because there's always a wind. It's really just that interior kind of, because boreal forest and tundra are kind of defined by intermittent permafrost, okay? So intermittent permafrost also means that you have lots of marshy areas for mosquitoes to lay eggs. The reason I make a distinction between the average year and last year is that I mentioned briefly there was no snow last winter. And snow acts as an insulative layer for those mosquito eggs. And so without snow, they all froze. And I don't think I got honestly, I don't think I got a single mosquito bite all summer. But like I said, if you're a birder, I think next year is going to be a good year. So basically, that's a very nice way of me saying that it might be a pretty bad mosquito year. But, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. It's all worth it, though. It's so much amazing things to see.
It's definitely worth it. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my last question, and then we'll wrap it up. What are your recommendations for clothing, packing for clothing, and the weather?
I've got this down to a science after a number of years. The trick for me is layers. So, of course, you want changes of clothes for every day, just regular T-shirts and pants, etc. But the trick really in Alaska is layering. So after that, you want to bring a fleece, maybe a larger coat, and a rain jacket. The same thing for your over your pants. Hiking boots that are that are waterproof are just fine, and they don't even have to be high-top hiking boots. You can just have hiking shoes that are comfortable. We won't be doing much walking on uneven terrain. I think waterproof is very, very important because it does tend to rain. Even on a very lucky trip that we have sun every single day, except maybe, there's going to be 1 or 2 days in there that are going to be pretty rainy. So layers, yeah, because when we're on the coast, the wind could be whipping, especially when we're on the boat near the glacier. Glaciers tend to make their own wind, and you can imagine it's a very cold wind. So yeah, I mean, layers for sure, and I think you can get away with it. Just don't bring 2 or 3 jackets. Just bring layers of a fleece and maybe something a little larger and in between, and then a kind of a heavier rain jacket.
Okay, perfect. Well, this has been so interesting. You've covered so much ground, and everybody listening, we will have the replay available to all of you. And so, Justin, I'm going to stop with the question and answer and turn it over to you for closing comments.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. Alaska has been my passion for a number of years, and I haven't thought about it since last early mid-September. Not to China since and Churchill since, but just putting together this webinar for you guys really gets me excited to go back up. It's my passion, and I really hope that I get to experience showing some of you that passion. So thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
And with that, we'll say good day and conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.